You're in the water loop.
Welcome to Waterloop, the podcast helping water leaders to discover solutions and drive change. I'm the host, Travis Loop. This episode comes to you from the Reservoir Center for Water Solutions in Washington, D.C., where Waterloop is a media partner. This is episode number 234, Safeguarding Our Seas, inside National Marine Sanctuaries. Marine conservation and the preservation of the U.S.'s most cherished underwater environments are critically important issues. National Marine Sanctuaries provide a solution by protecting these vital ecosystems. Shannon Colbert of the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation shares insights into the significance of these sanctuaries, which range from vibrant kelp forests and coral reefs to historic shipwrecks and cultural sites. The discussion delves into the establishment and expansion of sanctuaries, the importance of community involvement, and the multifaceted benefits of these protected areas. Shannon highlights ongoing efforts in marine debris removal, restoration work, and educational initiatives to foster a deeper connection and stewardship among the public. Shannon, thank you for coming to the Reservoir Center to have this conversation. I am a massive ocean lover myself, longtime fan of the Marine Sanctuary system, so excited to talk about it. For people that aren't familiar, what is the National Marine Sanctuary system and why is it important?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me, Travis. I am a kid who grew up around these places, these protected waters across the U.S. that are so special to each and every one of us, but for different reasons. So National Marine Sanctuaries are these protected areas all across our ocean that really focus on how can we protect the best of our waters, from vibrant kelp forests and coral reefs to the Great Lakes and shrunken shipwrecks and submerged lands to cultural sites that tell the story of our nation, our very origins, and beyond. And so these are places that we cherish, we hold dear, and at the same time sometimes go undiscovered until we can talk about them, learn more about them, understand them more through the work of people. And likewise to build connections to these places. So this national network really showcases a great diversity of what it means to be America and American waters. So if a place is a sanctuary, what does that mean for that place? What kind of like protection or resources does it get? What does that status mean? So these are nationally recognized, and there are 16 National Marine Sanctuaries currently, 2 National Marine Monuments that are part of that system. More and more are on the nomination list and want to become National Marine Sanctuaries, so it's a growing family. And in particular, these places are places that celebrate those natural and national heritage pieces. So they have federal protections. In many cases, that's in partnership with the states as well as local communities. How do we get people involved and aware of the importance of our ocean? 80% of life on Earth has been found in our oceans. How do we protect these places that stand for so much and likewise can be the sources of solutions moving forward? As we're tackling issues around climate change, around loss of that life on Earth, around inequities and access issues. These are places that really ground us in our history, but they teach us so much about that history in order to help us move forward. And they likewise are places where we can connect to that ocean and those Great Lakes that are really part of who we are. So these are places that allow us to explore that and to really understand what changes mean, but also to really figure out what are the actions that we can take.
I love that point that it is about conserving these places, protecting them, but learning, there's things we can learn from them and extrapolate out to the rest of the ocean and the environment. That's so cool. So the National Marine Sanctuary System is officially part of NOAA, the federal agency, and you're the foundation. Could you talk kind of about the roles there?
Yes, so in 2000, we started the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation. So we are a national charitable partner to the National Marine Sanctuary System, knowing that these special places, this network, really needed a champion and an advocate. and a partner in order to do the work that's needed. And likewise, to raise awareness about the importance of these places so that people can remain connected to them, whether or not they ever visit and see them themselves. So the foundation is that critical partner that thinks about this national system, thinks about each of these individual places and what makes them special, but ultimately thinks about how can we help with that connection, whether it is awareness and education, or whether it's actually getting out there and thinking about how we advance stewardship. How do we become advocates and stewards for these places? How do we make sure that they are there for our children and our grandchildren, and that they're vibrant, they're strong, they're healthy, and how are there more of them so that they actually reflect a lot of different pieces of our histories, some of which, even myself, I've been discovering recently. And that's the nice thing about, I think, America is we're such a melting pot. There's so many different things that make us who we are, that give us our identity. And likewise, that people are a core part of these places, which is very different, I think, than what most people would think about for a sanctuary. They think about it's far off, it's off limits. The exact opposite. It couldn't be, further from that. There are those places that are amazing and wonderful, like Papahanaumokuakea. But there's also places that I've known and loved since I was a kid, like the Channel Islands, National Marine Sanctuary off the coast of California, where I was born. And likewise, fishing in Gray's Reef National Marine Sanctuary in Georgia, where I was raised. So these are places that sometimes we don't even know about until we find that connection. And likewise, that we're able to get out there and explore and think about what that means for us. And I still take my kids to National Marine Sanctuaries whenever we're visiting different places. So they're a place that I want them to feel a connection to, because that's part of their history. And it's something that they should also be thinking about. How can we do our part to protect that moving forward?
See, my first thought with sanctuaries is the ocean itself, the aquatic life, the science, the water quality, et cetera, and these are special places because of their historic significance, the cultural connections, all of that.
Yep,
so
absolutely.
good stuff. What's going on with them these days? What's kind of the latest happenings? Very, very curious about that. I feel like I've seen a lot more in the news about the marine sanctuary system on social media and all that stuff.
Yeah, so I think for me the most exciting thing is that the National Marine Sanctuary System is continuing to grow. We have more communities that are thinking about the resources in their area, and also nationally significant areas, and they want those protected. And so they're going through and working with their partners on the ground, they're working with the states, they're working with the federal government, and we're thinking about how do we actually protect that moving forward. They're going through this process. And so we've seen new sites be joining the National Marine Sanctuary System very recently, and likewise there are more to come. And that for me is one of the most exciting pieces, because that is the community's role as a foundation. We think about how can we build partnerships and how can we galvanize people to make sure that they're taking part in this action. So for me, that's been one of the most rewarding pieces, is to be able to think about expanding the system, but also to do it in a way that really cherishes what it means to protect and manage an area, to have it live and move forward. And that's different for a lot of folks. And so it's recognizing what that means and working with people, getting on the ground and having conversations and thinking about what this is going to be for their future. And that's probably one of the most important things for me in sanctuaries, is that it allows us to have those conversations about what it means to conserve. I've also been very, very excited to see people thinking about how they can make a difference. The foundation has been supporting a lot of restoration work and stewardship and education work in sanctuaries recently. That for me is all about creating connections for people. How do we actually give people the tools and the ability to get out there and make a difference? Because we face a lot of issues that seem very hard, abstract, untouchable. But sanctuaries are the opposite. They're the sources for solutions that get you in the water, or make sure that you have a way to channel that action and be able to make a difference, not only for yourself, but for your family, your community, even people that you don't know. I tell my kids a lot of the times that sanctuaries are places that we go to learn, but we also have to actually ask ourselves, how can we make this place better?
One of the things I hear a lot about is this protecting 30% of the world's oceans, right?
Yep.
Does like the Marine Sanctuary effort fit into that, that goal?
Oh, for me, it's vital. It's central to how do we look at protecting our oceans. And for the foundation and for many others, it's important to make sure that we are protecting a larger part of our oceans, coasts, and Great Lakes. They're a major part of our planet. They control a lot of these pieces that we need to make sure that we have a strong planet overall. And at the same time, for us, it's just as much about how do we protect it? And where are we able to see those protections come forward? So the foundation is constantly trying to work with folks on the ground across the U.S. and honestly globally, because we know it's all connected in the end. And we have partners in other countries that we work with as we think about national marine sanctuaries and protected waters. But we focus on these places in the U.S. and U.S. territories that are seeing a lot of these changes, and we work with those communities in order to think about how we can move that forward.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Not to bring up a bummer topic, but marine debris and plastic pollution, again, big things in the news, things people hear a lot about, especially the plastic in the ocean. Just what's happening with the marine sanctuaries and that trash problem?
Yeah, so unfortunately, it is a global issue. But for me, sanctuaries are yet again a place that we can bring that together. Within our national marine sanctuaries, we try and think about how we can learn more. So we actually help support, in many different cases, people getting out there in order to help with removal of debris, whether that's on their beaches. For us in particular, we do work with a lot of divers in different locations, especially in the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary, to help with underwater removal. So we actually work with the dive community to remove debris that's made it into the reef system there, into the mangroves and into those habitats, because that's where our fisheries are revitalizing themselves. That's where birds are nesting. So it's important to actually get out there and be able to help support the removal, but that also then helps us do education and hopefully prevention as we move forward. And so in that case, that's where it's been a very holistic approach when it comes to plastic debris and likewise other debris that's more on the coastline. The foundation's also been working on what we call large debris. So these are sometimes, unfortunately, derelict vessels that have run aground, even parts of infrastructure that have, fallen off into national marine sanctuaries or into adjacent waters and had an impact. But we're able to work with those communities in order to remove that debris. And that is a huge impact when you think about actually being able to remove a vessel that's been derelict, affecting navigation, affecting wildlife. There's a huge process after that we've worked with the community in order to help. So it's important to think about all facets of debris so that we can actually restore these places and keep them in a healthy condition.
You keep coming back to solutions. I love that, right? It's like, yes, this is a problem, but we're working on it these ways and education through it. And speaking of education, you've mentioned the public and education and outreach a bunch in the conversation, but I wanted to see if you could expand on that to talk really about some of the specific ways you do that. Because like you've said, awareness, education, advocacy, like that's the critical piece. The one thing I always start with is that education is throughout your life. We are all lifelong learners, and we're better off if we're lifelong learners. Education, formally though, for K through 12 is also a major focus for the foundation. We try and work really closely with the communities, which means we work with teachers. We try and make sure that they, as our ambassadors and our carriers of knowledge forward, are really connected to these places. So it can be everything from providing lesson plans and content so that folks can actually, their kids who are learning can actually experience these places. In some cases, it is about access and getting certain school groups out to the water. And sometimes they don't live very far. They live within a mile, but they don't go out to the coastline. They don't see a national marine sanctuary, much less get on a boat and actually experience it or put their face under the water in some cases, which can be scary. The foundation tries to think about how we can open up those portals for access, because that's the spark and the connection that you want to make. And sometimes only by touching, feeling, seeing.
whether that's virtually or in person, physically. Can you create that connection? So that's always for us a question is how do we start with that? And then from there, whether that's a teacher, whether that's a student, whether that's a family, they can take different actions and carry that education forward. And I see so many times where the kids who have gone through NOAA's Ocean Guardian schools, which we have at many different sanctuaries and beyond sanctuaries, are taking those lessons and those stewardship actions that they do home. And that's all part of being able to start with the next generation that actually teaches us along the way.
Yeah. Love it.
I know.
So what's like next for you all? What's happening in the coming weeks, months, year? What's kind of on the near-term horizon here?
Yes. So much.
I was going to say, like, based on what you've been talking about, you are extremely busy, tentacles all over the place, but what are a couple things that really jump out?
So there are a couple that stand out for me immediately. So we are continuing to celebrate the newest National Marine Sanctuary, Lake Ontario in New York, in the Great Lakes waters, and working with them in order to get that site established, to think about what the community truly wants to see forward now that they're officially part of the National Marine Sanctuary system. That is a huge and exciting time. That's the start of the real work. It's funny when we work with communities on designations, they think about all the things that we do to bring the community together to talk about this. And I always tell them, now that you're designated, we've actually got to do it. How are we going to do this? And we're going to do it together. So that partnership and initial phase is so exciting for me because we've worked so hard to get that national significance, like to actually be recognized among only a handful of sites in some cases in that region. And likewise, Lake Ontario is actually a build throughout the Great Lakes. There's another site that is still in the designation process in Lake Erie for Pennsylvania, and we have other sites that are going through designation that I'm very excited. Hopefully, we're going to be seeing those online soon because we can only be stronger by adding more of these places.
You're talking about NOAA, which is a large federal agency. You guys are a national scale foundation, but throughout this whole conversation, you've talked about communities and the local groups and them driving the process, driving the stewardship. So that's awesome. I mean, it really comes down to that super local level ultimately, huh?
I always say people are the heart and soul of National Marine Sanctuaries in reality. So we might be looking at where we can save, endangered whales and sea otters or kelp forests that we need in order to survive and have vibrant fisheries. But in the end, it's the people that make a difference, and the partnerships that we have are the very lifeblood when it comes to the work that we need to do to make sure that we have a blue planet that's worth saving. And so for us, that's exactly why we have National Marine Sanctuary Days, to celebrate those volunteers, those dedicated servants, those leaders, those workers, the kids who are making sure that these are places that they want to continue to have and connect with. That's, for us, one of those big pieces is being able to celebrate the people.
National Marine Sanctuary Day, when is that?
Yep, so every year is October 23rd. So we're excited, we're ramping up a lot more of our work, and we want to make sure that we're celebrating both nationally, but also in each individual site in the future. These are where we should be recognizing what it means to be part of a National Marine Sanctuary and tell the stories of these places and these people in moving forward.
Lastly, people that are watching this, listening, they want to learn more, but especially if they want to get engaged, what can people out there do to support the National Marine Sanctuary System?
Yep. Well, the first step is always learning. So definitely encourage folks to come to marinesanctuary.org, our website, learning more about these places, because I think you need to understand and explore these places. You can do so virtually through a lot of our website work, as well as being able to partner with NOAA's Office of National Marine Sanctuaries. We have volunteer events that we try and push folks to so that they can give back locally. And at the same time, it always helps when folks are able to help support each other in the partnerships that we build. So those are a couple of the initial pieces, I would say. But I actually hope everyone can sometimes make it out to a National Marine Sanctuary to experience it for themselves, and thinking about, what's the closest sanctuary to you? is the first step.
That's so funny because I'm sitting here thinking that question in my head. I'm like, should I ask her that on the podcast in front of everybody? I live in coastal North Carolina. Would that Gray's Reef in Georgia be the closest?
So for you, it depends. Monitor National Marine Sanctuary is actually the closest. It is a Civil War ironclad, and it is our first National Marine Sanctuary.
No
Bonus.
way. Wow.
And it's actually going to be celebrating the 50th anniversary of the establishment of that site, the very founding and start of the National Marine Sanctuary system this coming year.
Okay.
So the place I would send you to is the Mariners Museum. They're our fantastic partner on the ground. They're up in Newport News, Virginia, because of the connections to the Navy and the Civil War. Okay. But that is the little ironclad that saved the Union, as they say.
Is that it's sunken somewhere?
It is.
And you could dive to it, I imagine?
Oh, it is pretty deep. So I don't think
gotcha.
it's really one you can get to the
Gotcha.
actual wreck itself.
All right.
Now, one I would recommend, and anyone who wants to come visit me in the Washington, D.C. area can come to Mallows Bay Potomac River National Marine Sanctuary. So they have a wealth of knowledge and information. So everything from trails and hikes around the Piscataway Indian lands to actually getting out on some of the kayaks and being able to, kayak your way through some of these shipwrecks that during low tide actually come a little bit above the waterline.
Yeah, I've seen the pictures. I've never been there, despite living in Maryland. I never have made it there, and it looks so cool.
Well, we've got a new resource that we will point you to if you go to the website. We actually have a full virtual tour, including being able to explore Mallows Bay.
Wow.
So you can actually go and do the know before you go. I always still want people to make it out there, but that way you can actually go and experience hiking trails, water trails, history and heritage, everything from our partners with the Piscataway Conoy Indian Nation to what are some of the osprey nests that are on some of these wrecks where nature has reclaimed some of that land. And that's the beauty of sanctuaries, is there's such a melding of our national heritage all the way through culturally to natural heritage.
Yeah.
The places that we want to go and recreate, and I take my kids out there all the time. So I've got two right off the bat for you.
There you go.
that you can
all right,
visit.
I've got my homework, which is great homework to have. Shannon, thank you so much. Awesome conversation. Appreciate it. And thank you and all your colleagues for working for these places. I say that just personally as an ocean lover, but yeah.
Absolutely. And I'm hoping the next time we'll maybe be out on a kayak in Mallows Bay.
I love it.
You're in the water loop.